Joining me today on the show is Sir Bill Browder. Bill, we always appreciate your time. Thank you for coming on the Trump Report.
Thanks for having me.
So let's start then today, Bill, with fresh from celebrating the brokering of his 20-point Gaza peace plan between Israel and Hamas, Donald Trump has suggested that he might be willing to now send Tomahawk missiles to Ukraine in what he described would be a new step of aggression in the war. What is your reaction to that possible news?
Well, on the surface, it looks like a great announcement. Ukraine needs all the help they can get. They need to strike targets, military targets, and economic targets inside of Russia. The Tomahawk missile is a very effective tool for doing that. The one reservation I have, which is also intimated in some of these announcements, is that Trump would, or the United States would ask for restrictions on targets that could be hit. And one of the things which I found so frustrating about the U.S. military aid to Ukraine during the Biden administration is that they would provide quite a bit of aid, but then they would put these very onerous restrictions on the Ukrainians to say that they could only use ATACMS missiles inside the territory of Ukraine, which I think is kind of crazy. If you have a foreign invader invading your territory and you can only hit them when they're in your territory, that kind of defeats the purpose. And in a certain way, Trump's initial foray into Ukraine, which was to withdraw military aid, gave the Ukrainians absolute freedom of movement to do what they wanted to do. And we've all seen that without the U.S. restricting Ukraine on hitting targets inside of Russia, they can be quite effective. And of course, we're all watching on a daily basis as Ukraine, using just drone technology for the most part, has immobilized and destroyed somewhere between 20 and 40% of Russia's oil refining capacity. And there are now fuel shortages and all sorts of other economic problems as a result inside of Russia. So what I'm worried about is Trump providing Tomahawks and then saying, you've got to give us a list of every target you want to hit in Russia, and we may reject those targets. And so let's see what happens. But that's the issue going forward.
Because we know the Tomahawks, I think they can range from between sort of 1,500 to 1,800 miles, which would hypothetically mean Ukraine could strike Moscow. But are you saying you'd imagine Moscow might be on that list of do not strike targets?
Well, I don't know what's going to be on the list or what's not going to be on the list, but I know that having a list creates a problem, because there's this fantasy that if you hit Russia, you're going to escalate, and all of a sudden we're going to be in a terrible nuclear war, which has never proved to be true. We know from the very beginning of the war that so many things could have been done. First, it was tanks, then it was ATACMS missiles, then it was F-16s, and everybody said, no, we can't do that. That's going to escalate. That's going to cause problems. No, we can't. And then we ended up doing it. It didn't escalate. It didn't cause problems. And if we had done it earlier, we would have saved lives and perhaps changed the outcome of the war. And so I don't know what's going to be discussed in these meetings. I don't know what restrictions will be put in place. That's the main reservation I have. The headline looks good. The details may not be so good.
Mm. So is there any cause for concern then? Because we know that Joe Biden's administration kind of famously didn't ever send any Tomahawks to Ukraine. So if this is a red line for Moscow, what does that realistically mean for the war and the world?
There's no such thing as a red line for Moscow. Moscow doesn't have the capacity to create red lines. Their big trump card is nuclear retaliation. But the reason why Putin hasn't used nuclear weapons is the same reason why every other Russian and Soviet leader has never used nuclear weapons, because using nuclear weapons leads to mutually assured destruction. And so there's sort of an absolute practical prohibition on using nuclear weapons. And otherwise, there are no red lines. Putin can huff and he can puff and he can make all the noise he wants to make. But at the end of the day, it's just huffing and puffing. And so I think that we should be giving the Ukrainians everything they ask for and everything they need to cause Putin untold damage, particularly to his military infrastructure and to his economy, because that's going to be the only moment that he comes to the table and agrees a ceasefire. He's not going to agree a ceasefire if he's not under duress, and he's not currently under duress.
Because you mentioned the Ukrainian-made drones here, but if the US does send these Tomahawks, that is a game changer, isn't it? That's a level up from Ukrainian drones.
I'm not sure anything is a game changer per se. Everything adds more pressure onto Russia. If they have the Tomahawks and they can use those Tomahawks to destroy arms production, if they can use it to destroy military bases, planes, or oil, just oil exploration, production, refining capacity. Those are the types of things which then adds more and more pressure onto Putin. And I think that altogether, putting that in place, other things, other military aggressive, offensive military equipment, plus going after Russia's oil revenue, those are all things that put together can put Putin in a position where he has no choice but to negotiate. But right now he's not in that position. And if you take President Trump at his word, he wants to force a negotiation, and that would be the thing. Those would be the things to do to force a negotiation.
Yeah, both yourself and other contributors have mentioned sort of the oil refineries on this show before. Now, peace through strength has become sort of something of a doctrine for the Trump administration. I think he even used the words in his address to Israel earlier this week. Do you think we've seen that yet applied in his approach to Russia?
I think we've seen just the opposite. So Trump has come in. What has he done practically? He practically has withdrawn financial military aid for Ukraine. There have been no more military aid packages proposed by the Trump administration or approved by Congress since he's been president. There's still some remaining U.S. military aid that was approved by Biden and approved by Congress that's coming into Ukraine, but that's going to run out. He has not imposed crippling sanctions of any sort on Russia. In fact, I'm not aware of any particular sanctions he's imposed at all. And so those are the two things that would be considered strength. Neither of them have been done. Now, I would be the biggest supporter of any actions he takes which deals with both those two issues, and hopefully he will.